we have almost a full row of stacks of lilacs, almost a full row of stacks of roses, a little bit short on the peonies, and almost a full row of stacks of sunflowers. But you might have noticed that we don't have blue as a tall flower. And in fact, some of you might not even have access to tall flowers to begin with. And so this begs the question, how can we address this problem of getting red, yellow, and blue dye without tall flowers or villager breeder? Through a regular flower farm. What up, my roomies, and welcome back to the technical guide to Minecraft. And today we're over here in the plains biome in order to make ourselves a flower farm. But wait, Kigu, why are we in the plains biome instead of a flower forest? Well, we'll get into that when we break it down, but the main reason why we're here is because, well, as a lot of you may know, Ambrosia is very monochromatic. And while I do think that the industrial center or the industrial floor that we're currently working on is going to be black and white, mostly just to dictate that it's all business there, it's very boring to kind of look at after a while. And when we start making other floors that have different purposes, we're going to need a way to differentiate them and kind of make them more appealing to look at. But in order to do that, we're going to need dyes. And in order to get dyes, we're going to need certain kinds of flowers. And with these certain kinds of flowers, you can make other variants of dyes. And so that's why we are at the plains biome, because the plains biome is going to be where the flowers that I'm going to need in order to get all the dyes that I want to have. And so, welcome to KiguCorp, where safety is a concern. So over here we have just a standard 3x3 grass area, and if we were to bone meal it, it'll of course make some grass, but depending on the biome, what'll end up happening is that occasionally it'll make a flower. In this case, it made a cornflower. And the cool thing about flowers is that when you try to craft them, it turns into dyes. And by using flowers, we could then color Ambrosia. Now the thing with bone meal is that at the center of a 7x7 area, it's able to spread within that area. So if I were to put this down, you'll see that it spreads out to the corners of a 7x7 area. If you want to maximize the amount of use of a bone meal, having a 7x7 area is definitely the way that we need to go. But like all things, us having a bone meal is, well, kind of boring. I mean, who wants to run around and bone meal the ground over and over again if it's not for the sake of aesthetics? If it's solely to pick flowers, there's got to be a better way to do this. Well, of course there is, because with a dispenser pointing at a grass block, and by having the dispenser full of bone meal targeting the grass block, it can make more and more plants, which will then give you a chance to create more flowers. So by having a 7x7 area right above us and filling the dispenser up with bone meal, if you were to then press this button, the kinds of flowers that you can grow depends on the biome that you're in. But us having to press the button over and over again in order to bone meal seems kind of like a waste of time too. At that point, we might as well just use right click in order to bone meal stuff instead of having all these contraptions. But even if you were to attach the dispenser to a redstone clock, having to pick up all this grass seems really like a waste of time. I mean, at that point, what's really the time save if we have to keep manually cleaning out the flowers and grass? Well, of course, there's a way to automate that too. So over here, you'll probably recognize this, the sticky piston redstone contraption that we use in a lot of our builds. And if we were to pull down the lever, you can see that the pistons are activating in sequence. But unfortunately, it's not as simple as pointing the pistons against each other, because even though the pistons are moving one after another, there's actually not enough time between them to have the grass block move left and right. So if you were to do this, you can see that even though observers are going left and right, not at the same time, there's not enough time in between for the grass block to go left and right. So in order to fix this, all we gotta do is just delay it by one tick using a repeater. And by doing so, the grass block is now able to go left and right. And supposing there's something on top of the grass block, now it can be harvested with just the pistons. And so, if we were to combine the redstone clock with a dispenser and the pistons, all we gotta do is just fill up this dispenser up full of bone meal, and then now you can see that every time the dispenser goes off, the grass or flowers that's growing on the grass block gets immediately broken by the pistons, thus allowing us to gather them. And so if you were to combine this whole thing with a 7x7 area, you get this contraption. Now there's an 8x7 grass area. At any given moment, one of the rows of grass blocks is going to be covered by the glass. So having one extra is going to ensure that a 7x7 area will always be bone mealed. If you remember from a few seconds ago, I said that flowers are dependent on the biome. It's common knowledge that flower forests have the most biodiversity in terms of flowers, but problem is with flower forests is that not all areas of the flower forest will give you that biodiversity. Take for example here, this flower forest will only create orange tulips. And while it does have a large range of biodiversity, you're gonna have to build the flower farm in exactly the area that has the flower in which you want to gather. So if I were to show you real quick, so you can see that even though there's some red tulips, majority of this is actually orange tulips. And so this part of the flower forest biome mostly just generates orange tulips. And so if you want a specific kind of flower, you're gonna have to go to that specific area within the flower forest and build these. And for that reason, we're gonna make a flower farm in a plains biome. Even though there's a lower biodiversity inside the plains biome, as you can see, you can get a lot more different kinds of flowers instead of having to specialize in just one. And so we're going to be using the plains biome at first to generate the primary colors, which of course is red, yellow, and blue. And then anything that we need beyond that, we'll go to the flower forest and make those specifically. If you want to play around with this, there's going to be a world download and a schematic in the description below. And with that in mind, let's head back to the technical guide world and get to it.
Quick interruption. I noticed that only 12% of you are actually subscribed to this channel. Watching this long, I must be doing something right, so if you like this video, hit that like button and please subscribe to this channel. Any support helps and these videos take a bit long to make. Thank you so much and back to the video.
Now that we've finished building that, let's do a quick test to see whether or not this is going to work. Because sometimes, depending on the orientation, you might need to swap this repeater out and move it over here because sometimes the game just kind of syncs up weird. But let's just see if this works as is. Okay, yeah, it works. Now that we know it works, let's go fill up this chest full of the bone meal that we have and go ahead and AFK this place until all the bone meal is pretty much used. Okay, now that we've used all the bone meal, you can see that we got ourselves a lot of dandelions, which is going to be our yellow dye. But not only that, we also got ourselves cornflower, which is going to be our blue dye. And lastly but not leastly, we also got ourselves poppies, which will be our red dye. And having our base colors of red, yellow, and blue, we'll be able to combine them to make different colors. But I'm going to need more poppies and cornflower in order to make red and blue. And while the plains biome gives you the variety of the base colors, we're going to need more of those specific colors. And so we're going to need to go over to the flower forest and build it specifically where the flowers are going to grow. Alright, after making those 2 flower farms, we finally got ourselves 2 shulker boxes worth of yellow dye, or dandelions, 2 shulker boxes worth of cornflower, or blue dye, and 2 shulker boxes worth of red dye, or poppies and red tulips, respectively. We have a bit of extra just because this isn't exact science. You're gonna have some extras probably. And I also got myself Lily of the Valley. It's pretty good. I mean, it makes white dye, which I don't really need because I have a bunch of bone meal, but I guess it's just nice to have. But yes, now that we've got all the primary colors that we're gonna need in order to make dyes, we're gonna look into some of the more weirder dyes. Specifically, we're gonna look at the lime dye, which you can only get with sea pickles.